Hello there, and welcome back to a preview of TerraFirmaCraft 1.20. Today we're going to be looking at mechanical power. So in 1.20 we're going to have water wheels and windmills. You are no longer going to need create to get, well, mechanical power. And there are quite a number of things that we can automate. So first, let's see what these recipes are. The acacia water wheel requires an axle, 4 lumber, and 4 planks. The axle is made with 2 stripped logs and a bit of glue. That gives you 4 axles. The windmill, you make the blades using this recipe, 3 lumber and 2 wool cloth, and you have to connect them to a horizontal axis. And you can connect up to 5 at a time. You can remove them. The more you have, the faster you'll spin, but you can only have up to 5 at a time. They do require the book says 13 by 13 by 1, and I wasn't sure which way those dimensions were being written. An obstructed area of 13 by 13 by 1. That actually means 13 up and down, 13 left and right, and 1 back. So this block is 8 blocks high, and that accounts for the 13 by 13. If I lower this by 1, will not work. There's not enough space. So yeah, if you're building off something, it needs to be at least 8 blocks up. And it does have to be horizontal for them to connect. Now we have a lot of different parts here. We've got the water wheel, we've got the blade, the windmill blade, axles, gearboxes, clutches, bladed axle, hand wheel basin, hand wheel, trip hammer, crankshaft. There are a lot of different things we can do and automate with these, well, new mechanical power. Something to note though is that the axles can only appear to be 5 blocks long before you need to have them intersect with something such as another gearbox. If I swap this out for another axle, it breaks immediately. So we can place a gearbox and be able to continue the power. But if you notice, when I placed it, the power is not transferring. You need a hammer and right click the sides that you want the power to come in and out of. And you can do this on multiple sides. So I can put a crankshaft there and there. Put another gearbox up there. Shift the power again. And feed that in, and now we have an automated quern. So if I grab some, toss it. There we go. Toss it in, and it will automatically grind the grain for you. Okay, well that's taking a quite longer than I expected, possibly because this is not going very fast. I imagine if I hooked up to the windmill, it might go a bit faster, but now you can automate your grain. And actually, let's check. Let's see if I can actually automate pulling the wheat out. I cannot. Okay. Well, then we'll just use the buffer of the quern. We do also have a clutch, and it works just like the clutch from Create. Apply a redstone signal will power the clutch, which will stop turning the axles attached to it. Well, that pass through it. We can also use a crankshaft here to automate a, well, bellows. We have our windmill coming down. If we stick the crankshaft here, we can stick a bellows right there. And then by taking a steel rod, we can connect it to the crankshaft, and that will power the bellows. Steel rod is just regular steel rod you make using an anvil. The crankshaft requires a brass mechanism, a brass sheet, and any axle. All of these use a lot of brass with all these new additions, so there's going to be a lot of need for, well, like I said, brass. Let's see. Brass is, of course, zinc and copper. And yeah, we're going to need brass mechanisms, which you get 2 per brass ingot. You're also going to need quite a few sheets, which are double ingots. And quite a few brass rods, too. So yeah, we're going to have to make sure we find a lot of zinc for 1.20. Thankfully, resources seem to be fairly common. If I fly think it was this way, towards the Badlands, you will see, at least for now, resources quite common in the rock strata. I say that, and now I can't find all the rocks I saw earlier. We can also make these encased axles. And you do that by taking one axle you already have, plus 2 strip logs and 2 lumber to turn into 4. And just like the cases in Create, you can use these to replace axles. In fact, I think you can just place these straight and they will work. Yeah, you don't need to have a basic axle in its place. But just like these axles, they will only carry power 5 blocks. So if you want to, well, travel further than 5, you will need to place down a gearbox. But this way you could at least build, say, your power system into a wall and not be able to see out. So far we've looked at windmills and water wheels. And if we open up our book, we have all the information we need for setting them up, the recipes, and we start to get an idea of what we can do with them. We've looked at the axles, the encased axles, the gearbox, the clutch, automated quarns. Next, we got trip hammers. If you've watched my vintage story, or if you're familiar with vintage story, there is a device that I have not yet gotten to, which is called a helve hammer or a heave hammer. It is a automated hammer that will hammer out, well, anvil recipes for you. We have the trip hammer here in TerraFirmaCraft. To work this, you need to have a bladed chestnut. A bladed axle. Doesn't need to be chestnut. The bladed axle is just an axle with a steel ingot attached to it. And if we replace that here, we can see it rotating. So what we do is we place the trip hammer underneath. I trust it can go either direction. We will find out in a moment. And then what you have to do is add a hammer to it. It must be a metal hammer. It cannot be a stone one. And okay, so that one worked because it was spinning clockwise. The counterclockwise, wait, that's clockwise. Okay, so I'm confusing myself. So it needs to spin and hit the hammer clockwise. When I had the hammer set here, the hammer was anti-clockwise to the direction of the rotation, so it did not work. If I want this to work, I need to just swap sides. Let's keep it uniform. If we stick that there, we can add the hammer, and now this will work. Yes. What do we use this for? Well, if we go over here, find my flint and steel, light up my forge, we've got some steel here firing up. Once this reaches the point where you can forge with it, we can toss it into the anvil and give it a recipe. And how the hammer works is it will always apply a light hit, I believe, and it will just slowly work its way towards whatever the item that's being worked on requires. So this may not be fast enough. Can I add an additional water wheel to speed this up? No. Okay. So the water wheel may not be fast enough to do this efficiently. But if you did notice, I have a black steel anvil and I have a copper anvil. You cannot work steel on a copper anvil. So if you put the steel or your ingot on the wrong anvil, you will get a audible indicator. So we're going to just wait for this to max out its heat so it stays hot long enough. So it's going to be yellow-white. And then we will place one here, give it a basic recipe, and then we'll place one there and give it a basic recipe, and we'll see what happens. Toss it in here, and let's give it steel plans. Steel rods. And you see, it moved. So, like I said, if this were quicker, it would spin faster. I don't think there's the equivalent of a rotational speed controller just yet. There we go. And so that will slowly work its way up to being complete. If we, however, go and test this on the copper anvil, well, first off, you can't actually give it a recipe because it's the wrong type. But when this goes up, we should hear a different sound. Okay, we didn't get any sound at all. Alright, so this is now cooled off. We cannot hammer it. So what will happen when this hits it this time? There we go. That loud clunk indicates that it is no longer hot enough and it cannot actually complete the recipe. So we toss it back in here, let it heat up a bit more, and then we can put it back in and it will finish the recipe for us. So I know we can use this trip hammer to, well, hammer the ingot into whatever it's supposed to be. This should complete on the next cycle. What I don't know is if we can use this system to weld together. Okay, so it's exactly lined up now. Maybe it needs one more hit to be done, provided it stays hot enough. Ah, it just cooled off. All right, let's toss that back in. So why don't we grab these two while we're waiting? Toss them in. Oh, wrong ones. And a bit of flux. Let's see if it welds them. No, it does not. Okay. So we cannot auto weld. We do have to do that ourselves. But if we grab this one, which should be just about ready, one more hit and this should complete the plans and turn it into a pair of steel rods. Okay, it did not. Maybe this is another example of needing to be in creative for in survival for the system to work properly. Back to survival. Yeah, I can't. That's why I couldn't move. I was holding the anvil. No, still not completing the recipe. So I'm rather confused because the book does say that when you place the trip hammer below the axle and you right mouse button to add a hammer, the hammer must be a metal hammer. Make sure the trip hammer is oriented such that the blade will push the hammer handle down. Okay, so that would have answered my question from earlier. The hammer will then hit the anvil placed in front of it, and the trip hammer always records the last hit action. Always moves the cursor closer towards the target, requiring no input from the player. Think it's not hot enough, or if it's the correct anvil tier, you'll hear the deep metal bang, which we did here. But this is not completing the recipe, which is confusing to me. So let's toss that in and grab another ingot. Let's give it a different. So here now we've got it set for a hoe. Okay, so this last hit should line them up and we'll see what happens. All right, well, it's lined up. Yep, so that's not completing it. So I'm rather confused whether it's just not fully yet implemented or if I am doing something and not understanding it properly. Yeah, so if this is indeed how it's supposed to work and it's not going to finish the recipe for you, what you should then do is put it in another anvil. It will automatically have the correct recipe. It will have the bars lined up. What you can then do is, if you look at this recipe, it's bend, not last, hit, not last, and then punch. So you can do a hit, bend, punch, or if we just follow this exactly, bend, hit, punch. Wherever it winds up, you can then go backwards to roughly equal position, redo the recipe again, the bend, hit, punch, and that will line it up and that will complete the recipe for you. So it will make it a bit easier to at least get to the middle. But yeah, I was expecting it to actually finish the recipe for you if you put it on the anvil. And the last new tool we have are pumps and pipes. So Steel pipes are made from steel sheets. Looks like you get 8 per sheet. And the pump requires two pipes, glue, and a brass mechanism. And this way we can actually transport source blocks: saltwater, freshwater, spring water, and I believe it includes lava. Useful for transporting fluids such as water, salt water, and spring water. It does not say lava, so it might not include lava, but this probably means it can also transport dyes as well. Maybe we'll have to test with lava. But the way it works is you got to have the base of the pipe submerged in water. It can only go 16 blocks. The pump only reaches 16 blocks, so that's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Put that there. The water will pour out that way. Next, what we need is to have a crankshaft connected to the pump. Put crankshaft there. Grab our rod. We placed it in the wrong direction. I feel like I'm doing this pump slightly wrong. Let's double check the book. Aha. Okay, so that's how it connects. Got it. That makes a bit more sense. Which means that this is not going to be set up correctly. Okay, well, let's adjust this a bit then. And that will pull the water out and come this way. So this nice little basin I made is not going to be worth anything. Oh, that's now facing the wrong direction. There we go. Now it's pumping. All right, so again, the basin I made is not worth anything because it's not done correctly. Yes, okay, so the pump has to come in from the bottom? Well, anyway, we just transported some source blocks up through the pipe. So again, this could be useful for farmer life. And now with water in your reservoir, we can actually set up an aqueduct system. So you can actually, well, irrigate your farms if they're up on a piece of land like this where they're not next to the water. Or more specifically, you don't need to build your farms along the banks of rivers. If we do an aqueduct like this, there we go, it will carry the water. And then from here, you know, we can always take it out to a source block, well, to a block. And then if we grab a hoe, we can keep the ground fully irrigated just about anywhere. We don't need to, well, like I said, build our farm right on the riverbank and hope that we get enough irrigation from it. It's like 2 days later, and I realized I forgot to do something with, well, the double ingots. So we tried hammering out with this regular ingots. We tried doing, we tried making this into, there we go, pipes. And, you know, it wouldn't finish the craft. What we didn't try is double ingots. Double ingots, if we set it to make a sheet, well, that only requires, what is it? 3 hits, right? At the end? 3 hits at the end. So what we're going to do is we're going to heat up. I put 5 in here. I really didn't need 5. I just needed 1. We'll heat up these, wait for them to be workable. Go and toss them on here and see if this will actually turn it into sheets. If that's the case, then you can semi-automate some of the production. You can't pull them out of here, but we'll see what we can do. All right, we got one of these as yellow white, so let's toss it on, give it a sheet plan, and now we just need to wait for this to hammer itself through. This is not going to stay hot enough at this speed, so it's going to take me a minute of running back and forth. And this should be the last hit, and we'll see what this does. Yeah, okay, that did turn it into a sheet. For a few of the recipes where it ends hit, 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 this will automate it. that's for making double sheets. Sheets. And what else ended hit? I know sheet did. And saw blade. That's a hit. Looks like that's it. So double sheets and saw blades can be fully automated with this hammer and anvil as long as you keep it hot enough. But everything else, well, it'll get you to the center. And then from there, you can work back and complete the recipe. All right, but I wanted to check that out. So I'm glad to see that that does work the way I thought it might. And I believe that's everything for mechanical power. I can't see anything else that I've missed. I may have, but it happens. But yeah, this will allow us to, well, pump fluid out so we can have reservoir and work our aqueducts a bit easier than trying to find a mountain with a water source high up so we can run the water all the way to wherever our base happens to be. This would be great in my current save in 1.18. We can automate our bellows so we don't have to manually press them. The hammers over here, it's the only thing that's throwing me. Because on the surface, this makes perfect sense. You put the ingot on, you give it the correct recipe, boom, it will craft it into the correct item for you. But it doesn't actually finish the recipe, it just brings it to the center point. It does make it easier once you have it centered to be able to then figure out what you need to press to get it back to center. But yeah, I was expecting this to actually complete the recipe for you itself without you having to do anything. And then of course we can auto grind, which is something that annoys me in TerraFirmaCraft, that I cannot mill grain in the mill attached to a water wheel because for reasons. But here, now we can use either a windmill or water mill to mill grain, and that'll be automated. Obviously, the faster it goes, the faster it will mill it. But then again, if you just stick, say, a bunch of grain in and you walk away, it's gonna grind on its own. You'll have to stand there and do it yourself. In my current save, I only mill the grain that I need presently. With this, I can just stick a stack in, walk away, and I mean, the flour's good for a few days. Months. Flour's good for a few months. Oh, that's full. Which means you can put the grain in and only come back. You can put it in, walk away. If you forget it for 3 or 4 days, you come back. It's not ruined. It's not going to go rotten on you. You can then take it out and make whatever you need to make. Yeah, that's mechanical power. I hope you learned something today. I hope I made sense because some of it wasn't making sense to me at first. The crankshaft was particularly giving me issues. But until next time, thank you for joining me today. I hope you've had a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. Later.